it's no different than what's happening online when you're on a website. They're watching what you're typing, where you're scrolling on the screen. When you put privacy in that perspective, and a lot of the plaintiffs' attorneys are putting that perspective into the judges' minds, the judges are ruling against a lot of these companies, and they're losing because technically they are violating people's privacy if they're not providing proper consent and disclosure.
How does a real privacy lawsuit look like? How scary can it get?
So I just mentioned the one.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the e-commerce coffee break podcast. Privacy lawsuits are not longer a problem just for big corporates. They're now hitting CPG brands, Shopify stores, and fast-growing DTC business every day. Old laws are being used in new ways, and many merchants don't see it coming. One overlooked tracking pixel, one missing consent, and suddenly you're facing massive legal bills from these lawsuit chasers. Today, we're breaking down why this is happening, how the real risk actually is, and what smart e-commerce operators can do to protect themselves. Joining me to unpack all of this is Richart Ruddie. He is a serial entrepreneur and founder of Captain Compliance, a fast-growing data privacy software solution that helps CPG and e-commerce brands automate compliance and fight back against litigation risks. Richart, great to have you on the show.
Thank you. Amazing opening.
Let's dive into it. Why are privacy lawsuits hitting CPG and e-commerce brands right now?
So I think if you look back to when GDPR, which is Europe's privacy law, when that came out, it was really targeting more so big tech, and that's who took it seriously, where the smaller businesses did not. Now we've evolved and we've seen so much happen in both tracking technologies, ad tech, and litigation for the big names. You've seen multi-billion-dollar fines doled out to Meta, to Microsoft, and these bigger brands. TikTok as well as paid big dollars. Now it's filtered down to the plaintiffs' attorneys have realized, especially here in America, like, wait a second, I can go after businesses and I can collect money for privacy violations on behalf of consumers. So that's one trend that's really picking up, because to fight Google or to fight any of these big tech companies is going to cost a lot of legal bills and take years, where the plaintiffs' attorneys have figured out that they can go after CPG companies and they can get kind of more like ambulance chaser kind of quick hits, and it's becoming a profit center. And the rise of legal tech, especially AI legal tech, is making it easier and easier for these plaintiffs' firms to both identify violations and to send out mass violation demand letters and arbitration demands and file lawsuits in mass, where it would have taken a lot longer in the past. So all these things are converging now, and I think 2026, in my opinion, is going to be the biggest year that we're seeing in terms of privacy lawsuits filed, demand letters, and it's only ramping up. And we've seen it even in the very beginning of the year. Already had a client where normally we would see $45,000, $50,000 demands off the bat. Now it's grown to $900,000, and a company's shivering like, we need to get on this and fix this right away. It's right. We heard your webinar. We heard the warning sign. We didn't do anything, and now it's going to cost us a few $100,000. Like, now we want to jump on it.
Mm-hmm. I think it's very important that you say this has become a real problem for brands out there. And just to highlight how complicated it is, you mentioned for Europe is GDPR, which in itself is complicated enough. But for the US, there are many, many more privacy laws today. Talk me through it. How many are there and how do they apply to brands?
Yeah, so globally, there's over 144 different privacy laws. GDPR is so complicated that even the EU regulation body has fined themselves for a violation. So they said, even we are not immune, right? Even we can have slip-ups. So it just shows you the complication there. The US is very interesting. So any of your audience that's listening, know that there are 20 state privacy laws, and each of those have different thresholds and requirements to comply with. But that's not what most of the plaintiffs' firms are going after. They're finding everything from unfair competition to one called the California Invasion of Privacy Act to another federal law called the Electronic Communications Privacy Act. And they're getting very creative in the ways that they're saying and finding violations. And they're finding ones where they can use consumers. And ironically, they're running ads on the Facebook, Instagram to recruit consumers and plaintiffs to go ahead and then file these claims. So, and the claims are usually, hey, you're running retargeting and you're running advertising through Facebook and Instagram, and yet this is what we're going to come after you for. So that's been definitely one of the big trends that we're seeing and noticing.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty scary. Me being a marketer and all our listeners out there probably using Meta ads, Google ads, and not aware of this. Let's dive into a little bit of what kind of tools or which kind of things you use on your website cause the most trouble. Is it pixels? Is it analytics? Is it chats? What's most commonly the problem there?
We actually have a list of heavily litigated pixels and cookies and trackers. Ad targeting technology is going to be at the top of that list. You mentioned Meta Pixels is a big one, but we're also seeing, again, the law firms are being so industrious, they're being so creative that they're coming up with not just one or two, they're going through a whole list. So we've seen LinkedIn Insights tag, we've seen TikTok, we've seen Google Analytics being claimed that that's transferring data. CCPA, which is California's law, has a special provision that if there's a data breach, then you can have a private right of action, meaning any individual can go ahead and sue you. So now we've seen in one of the cases that the judge has ruled that the Meta Pixel has exfiltrated and shared data, and they're considering that a data breach. So Meta is usually the number one because it's on millions of websites, but going down to even smaller and more nuanced tracking and ad targeting technologies. AdRoll is another one that we saw pop up recently. And then on the session replay side, so if you're using something like a Hotjar, Microsoft Clarity, any of those tools, those are also really important to make sure that you have proper disclosures. So those are the biggest ones. Anything that's watching how you're moving around on a screen. And the way I like to describe it from the viewpoint of, say, like a Tim Cook from Apple says, you wouldn't be comfortable if somebody was leaning over your shoulder, watching everything you're typing on your computer, everything you're typing in your phone, every text message, right? Well, it's no different than what's happening online when you're on a website. They're watching what you're typing, where you're scrolling on the screen. So when you put privacy in that perspective, and a lot of the plaintiffs' attorneys are putting that perspective into the judges' minds, the judges are ruling against a lot of these companies, and they're losing because technically they are violating people's privacy if they're not providing proper consent and disclosure.
Mm-hmm. How does a real privacy lawsuit look like for a brand? What steps are involved? How scary can it get?
So I just mentioned the one with $900,000 in claims. That's because they're using a handful of different trackers and they're adding statutory damages for each one. There are others that we've seen. A company in the telehealth space that got hit with a $5 million class action lawsuit last year. After speaking with us, we said, you should definitely do something. They said, oh, we'll get to it. They didn't. And then all of a sudden they messaged me actually in the middle of the night saying, do you protect against metapixel litigation? I'm like, that's exactly what we've been saying. That's what we were created to do. And he said, well, it might be too late, but we have this $5 million class action lawsuit. So the lawsuits tend to be pretty scary in most cases. There's even one individual who's doing what's called pro se complaints, meaning he's filing as an individual without a law firm. And again, I believe he's using some sort of AI tech because he's sending out en masse. But usually they'll look at your terms of service. They'll see if you have some sort of arbitration demand or clause in there. If there is an arbitration clause, then they try to force you into an arbitration. So then you got to hire an attorney. Then you have to hire and pay for the arbitration fees. So they know right off the bat it's going to cost you a few $1,000s there. And they try to look really scary. So they'll say how they've invaded and you surreptitiously have sold and shared their data and their personal information without their permission, that it's being shared with all these other sites. And then they actually show proof. There's actually tools that they've have used, like a GET request and or a HAR file, and it'll actually show here's the documentation of the data of the plaintiff being shared. So there's not really a way to say, hey, I didn't do it, because they did. So they make it look scary, right? And they know what they're doing. They're getting more and more sophisticated. If anybody here listening has dealt with an ADA or a compliance lawsuit, then you know that privacy is just a bigger version of that, because there's only a certain percentage of the population that has some sort of disability coming to your website, but there's a much larger database of people that are considered data subjects, which is any individual. So you as a data subject, if you're a resident of Spain, then you actually have rights against websites in the US if they're accepting your traffic. So that's why if anybody's listening to the EU and you actually go to a website that's a news site, for example, in the US, most news websites are actually blocking EU traffic because they just can't. There's no way that they can be compliant, and they know it. So they just block all EU traffic. But most business owners are not blocking any EU traffic. So technically, they'd be at risk as well. And if there was private right of action from GDPR, then that would be a whole other explosion in profit center that the EU regulatory body would be able to capitalize on.
Mm-hmm. Now, it's a really scary situation. I have been in a similar situation more than 20 years ago. Since then, I'm clean. So, and as you said, you get a very scary letter and you might have some sleepless nights. And for our listeners who have never been there, try to avoid this in the first place, even if there's just scaremongering and actually it's not that bad, but you don't want to have this in your business. Now, Richart, obviously you found a solution with Captain Compliance there. So you are helping with this. Tell me, how do you help brands in getting not in a bad situation in the first place?
Yeah, and we want everybody to be proactive. Not everybody listens. Even a couple of weeks ago, we had one that said, I heard your webinar. I heard the warning signs. We told our IT and staff team. They said, oh, yeah, we fixed it. Well, guess what? They didn't properly fix it. So again, it's one of those situations they call. I would say about 90% of privacy software out there is not properly configured or doesn't work. And that's created great opportunity. I was speaking with a privacy defense attorney yesterday, and he told me how there's some serious class actions going on in firms that know that these banners don't work. They'll look at a banner, they screen record and say, hey, look, we clicked decline all, and everything was still firing and going off, like caught red-handed. And these companies are paying out some pretty big dollars, and it's considered dark patterns, which also then we talked about how the plaintiffs' attorneys. Also, you have to now worry about the FTC here in the U.S. and other regulatory bodies that are saying this. So we've created Captain Compliance to be a full-service privacy software suite where we provide everything from a cookie consent banner that actually works. We handle the integration for clients as long as they let us, and we like to test and make sure that it's doing as it's supposed to. We are very proactive, where we're consistently looking for any new tech that's added to the site and then classifying it appropriately. So being proactive is a really important part of what we do. We also have a dynamic cookie policy. So we'll scan a site and we'll update the whole library of any sort of tech on there and have a public audit. So we have a client who is actually, they were running Taboola. Again, we were talking about Facebook. We were talking about Google, TikTok. We didn't even talk about Taboola. Taboola is another one of these random ad campaign softwares you can run, and they were running Taboola, and they got hit with one of these privacy claims. But because they were using our software, we were able to get the case dismissed almost instantly. So having like a public audit has been really helpful of what's running on the site. And then we also have what's called a data subject access request portal. So different states, and especially the EU and GDPR, give users data subject rights where you can request your information. It's a growing field, and one of the reasons it's growing is there's some savvy software companies. One's called Privacy Hawk, and what they've done is they've commoditized the ability to go through your actual email inbox and see everywhere you're subscribed to, and then they give you like a click once and then tell us you want to opt out, and then they send those removal requests. So as those are ramping up, more and more of these data subject requests are going out. If you don't comply with those and you ignore it, then you're subject to $7,500 fine in most jurisdictions. So that's creating other issues. So we have figured out a way to not only help ingest those, but if the clients won't, we can completely automate those requests and the handling of those. And then finally, we have a privacy policy software. So as new legal requirements and laws come out, which just this month, we've had 3 new laws that have come out, we are automatically and proactively for all of our clients who have opted in to update these privacy notices and add specific supplements. So say Indiana, Rhode Island, Kentucky, and in the USA have come out with new privacy laws and requirements. Anybody targeting consumers in those states have to have specific supplements. So we're able to automatically update those. And the Oregon State Attorney General said at a recent privacy conference that they were not okay with websites having only California as a state having a separate privacy notice, that they want to see Oregon having the same rights, and they're going to start being proactive coming after businesses that don't respect Oregon users' rights. So our job is to find out all these sort of nuances and edge cases and then protect against it to protect our clients. And as far as I know, we're the only ones with what we've come out with called compliance shield. So we actually have litigation protection where we'll back and put our money where our mouth is. If you get a claim or a privacy violation, you're using our software with the proper settings, that we'll take care of the defense of the case. So it's good. Clients love saying, "Oh, like you actually believe in your product," and we're like, "Yeah, that's why we're here."
And I think you just gave a good insight how complicated this whole topic is. There's nothing that you can just read up and do by yourself. It's far too complicated for this. Now, when you're a brand and you're just coming new to this topic, what's the very first step you should take? Is it an audit? How do you evaluate your risk level?
Yeah, we actually love doing these free privacy audits. So if anybody is interested, we do a free privacy audit. We'll go through the website. We'll see what's missing, what you do have, what's working, what's not working. And you may be shocked how many people say, "Oh yeah, we don't even use," we had one the other day, "Oh, we don't even use TikTok. We don't even do this." And we're like, "Oh, here in our scan, right, we see that you are using TikTok." And they say, "Oh, our old agency set that up." And then what's happening is some of these firms and CPG companies, as they get in trouble, they're going after their ad agencies and saying, "Oh, well, the ad agency added this, so they should be the ones that are liable." So the first thing is doing a privacy audit, always checking to say what's running on the website. Do you have a privacy policy? What's notated in it? When was it last updated? Is it relevant? We've had clients who've come to us and said, "We have this privacy policy. Is it good?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm looking at it. It's saying that you don't have any cookies, no tracking technology, but if you do add anything, that you'll surely update everybody who's ever been to your website." I said, "Do you update everybody?" They said, "No." I said, "Did you just copy and paste this from another website and not even look at it?" So that's what's happening a lot. And then it's important to be proactive. So you can use an LLM to create maybe a baseline privacy notice, but you got to continuously update it. And as these new laws come out, and if you have text messaging if you're doing email marketing, there's all these new litigation things happening and trends. So it's important to include and continuously update and kind of roll with the punches as these new edge cases continue to come out. And that's one of the things that's made our job really exciting and really complicated for everybody else, where they're like, we can't handle this. Like, thank goodness for a service like yours.
Mm-hmm. Walk me through the typical onboarding process of a new client. What steps are involved? How long does it take to get up and running?
Yeah, definitely. So it's always going to depend on the complexity of their systems, how many websites they have. We usually suggest that they use all the modules that we offer. It starts usually with a scan of the website, seeing what the deficiencies are and what they need. And then we build out and we classify all their different technology. We do have a library of a few 100,000 different cookies and tracking technologies that we've built. So a lot of that legwork luckily is done upfront, because we've been working on this and we've had so many different websites with so many different tracking tech that we've been able to ingest and identify a lot of these technology and tools. But a lot of times we'll end up with these random cookies or pixels that are only on one site because they have some sort of specific notation or purpose there. But the first part is classifying, identifying what's on the site. We would build out both our dynamic cookie policy for them and the consent banner logic. We prefer to use a tag manager. Google Tag Manager is one of the most commonly used, and we use that to order the different tags in firing order. It depends on the location. So if somebody's in the EU and GDPR doesn't allow them to fire cookies and act right off the bat, they have to get consent to opt in. The US is in a different model. So with the US, you can have those things turned on by default if the client wants. So we go through kind of what the risks and what the laws are. And then We integrate with that. We can do it within a day. We help them build out their privacy notices based on their privacy practices. Some clients are very proactive and are ready to go right off the bat. Some need time. Some need to bring in extra legal. So it definitely varies by client, but I would say the CPG clients tend to be actually some of the easiest ones that we onboard, and that's because a lot of them are the founders are very active. They have smart marketing teams that are there, and they're good about being proactive. Where some of the larger enterprises just have more moving parts and they take a little bit longer to do the onboarding. But so I could say typically within a day or so, we're building out a Shopify plugin that's about to go live because we've had so many requests and clients that have used Shopify. And then once we're onboarded, testing is very important. So going through the website, going through making sure everything's working, acting properly. And then we continuously to update and do all of our work in the background behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm. Lots of our listeners running Shopify stores, they will be very happy to hear that. Now, it can be very complex, as you mentioned, but is there a general guideline in regards to your pricing structure? How do you charge?
Yeah, so we try to be flat pricing. Our pricing starts at $449. There are times where the clients have multiple websites. Sometimes it's just a basic subdomain. Sometimes it's a little more complicated. But usually that tends to be our baseline pricing. And then obviously they're buying multiple websites. So we do work with a lot of agencies, and they'll onboard multiple websites, and with bulk purchasing, price obviously can go down. But yeah, and we try to be very transparent. There are some of those vendors that I mentioned where the pricing or the products don't actually work, and they have very non-transparent pricing. And in those, they'll say usage-based, and you think you're getting in and it's cheap, and then all of a sudden they get hit with some huge bill or big renewal and everything. So we try to be very flexible. I come from a startup background. I'm a founder. Like a lot of these CPG brands are founder-led still, so I empathize with them and glad to work with them, and just being flexible and working, on their terms and so forth.
Very cool, Richart. As we're a bit limited on time today, before our coffee break comes to an end, is there anything you want to share with our listeners that we haven't covered yet?
If anybody's interested or curious, or you think that you are covered with the privacy laws, don't just think that, confirm. It's really important, because I'd hate to have another one of these where I heard your podcast or we were attending one of your educational webinars and our IT person said, yeah, we're good. And then we got hit with one of these suits and it cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars that we didn't need to spend. We'd much rather do an audit for you and help to kind of disclose and help you figure out what the risks are. So I think that's really important. And I think just being transparent and being open, there are big risks out there. It's good to have somebody who's willing to fight for you and put their money where their mouth is. And you're not alone. There's we even got an intro earlier tonight of somebody who said, hey, we've been dealing with this privacy litigation, and there's somebody else who's being proactive, but I noticed their banner doesn't work. Would love for you to help protect them because you've done such a good job for us.
Mm-hmm. I think proactive is the right keyword there. And to our listeners, be proactive and then you will be safe. Where can people go and find out more about you?
Yeah, so definitely. So I welcome everybody to go to captaincompliance.com. You can contact us through the site there. We also have Alex Proctor, our Chief Privacy Officer, is proactive on YouTube. He's putting out educational videos all the time. So if there's an email, we can share that as well. Or you can go to YouTube and type in Captain Compliance. Those are the best places. And then we're on LinkedIn as well. And the team's around pretty much 24/7. We're missionaries, not mercenaries. So we're here around the clock, as you can tell, based on the hours that we talk at.
Absolutely. So I will put all the links in the show notes as always. Then you will be just one click away, and I hope a lot of people will reach out to you. Richart, thanks so much for giving us an overview for this very important topic. I think I will go back and look at my own business from what I have learned now, and probably will have a second talk with what I can optimize on my side. So for our listeners, go out, check it out, and leave a comment if you have questions, and I'm sure Richart will reply to that. Thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you.